Hello.
Hi, Geshe. Welcome back to Tushita.
Early.
That's fine.
Okay, wait a few minutes.
Yes, Geshe. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody, to Tushita. Glad to see you all. Good afternoon in India. Good midday in Europe, the Americas. Good evening in Australia. Thank you so much, Geshe, for joining us. And we're looking forward to another session. Thank you so much, Geshe.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kumbin. All right, well, let's start. Kumbin, you're going to do the prayer, right? But before we do the prayer, we start with a few moments of just setting the right kind of motivation for studying this text. So to think that may studying this text enable me to understand its full meaning, understand emptiness. And then based on that understanding, may I gain the direct realization, the direct experience of the ultimate nature of all phenomena, including myself, so that it becomes like a knife that can cut through my obstructions to liberation, but also obstructions to the enlightened state of a Buddha. So that I attain the state of a Buddha for the welfare of all sentient beings. And then based on that motivation, let's do the prayer.
I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
All right, so we've got a little bit left in the text. Rinpoche really finished the text, and I'll of course do the same, go through it again, these last verses. But I was actually asked last time, after the last review class, to go over something Rinpoche went over during his last teachings, and I didn't have the time. I was planning to do it, but I didn't find the time to do it. So Rinpoche gave a very quick overview on the 5 levels, that is the 4 levels, and then the 4 levels to enlightenment, and then the 5th level, which is enlightenment itself. And so I was asked to repeat that, and it was really just quite short. I'll do that in a similar short way. But what I also want to bring in is this explanation combined with the explanation Rinpoche gave yesterday on the analogy he gave with the knife, the hand, and the body, the 3 trainings, so you remember. Okay, so I thought that's a very good way of explaining the 3 trainings. I mean, that's one analogy that is given. The knife is like the wisdom realizing emptiness. With that, we cut through whatever is extra in our mind, whatever is in our mind right now that keeps us from becoming enlightened. Well, that can only be attained if we have a stable hand that holds the knife in a stable fashion, so that the knife cuts always in the same place, or an axe is often used as the analogy. So an axe, the wisdom being like the axe, and the hand that's very stable, that's not going here and there and everywhere, but cutting in the same place over and over. That's like concentration, focused mind, a state of focus that is combined now with this understanding of emptiness, wisdom. And you need the whole person, like holding the knife, a strong person, a well-nourished, healthy, strong person. That's like morality. Now, this describes what I call the 3 trainings: the training of morality or ethical discipline, the training of concentration, and the training of wisdom. And now, in combining this now with the 5 path, well, something else needs to be explained on top of that, which is bodhicitta, or the motivating force that the mind of enlightenment, which is really, it's an aspiration. It's a wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And if you have this mind, and I'm not just talking about a temporary wish, oh, today I wish this and tomorrow it's something else. No, it starts off with an aspiration, a wish, and it becomes stronger, so that it's a determination, and that all your actions are informed by this motivation, that whatever you do in the back of your mind, you do it to become enlightened. So this is the meaning of your life, the meaning of your lives. Whatever is to come, it's to become enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings. And this motivation now directs all your actions towards enlightenment. That is the power of the mind. In that, enlightenment is a mental state. Rinpoche talked about it often enough. And so you're directing your mind in that direction. And now, when you practice morality, practicing ethical discipline, well, it becomes the bodhisattva ethical discipline. Rinpoche briefly talked about it yesterday, that you can talk of morality as pratimoksha, or self-liberation morality, bodhisattva morality, and then tantric morality as a special technique. Tantra, a technique to become fully enlightened. But here in particular, self-liberation morality and bodhisattva morality. Bodhisattva morality includes, for instance, the bodhisattva vow. Rinpoche spoke about the bodhisattva vow in that context, so taking a vow. But here it's really the discipline that a bodhisattva engages in. That's also accumulating merit. I mean, there's no that's the same thing. It's like you engage in the activities of a bodhisattva. That is the moral aspect. That's the ethical conduct of a bodhisattva, and you accumulate merit with that. And the motivation, of course, because you want to become fully enlightened, all your ethical behavior becomes bodhisattva's behavior, becomes the meritorious activity that now takes you towards enlightenment. And it's like what you need is like the capital you need to for any business venue. If you compare this ethical morality or ethical conduct, well, that is, or accumulating merit, if you want to look at it from that point of view, it's really saying the same thing. That's like the capital you need, for instance, when you do business. You need some money to start a business. So you have the wish to start a business. That's like generating the mind of enlightenment. And to actualize that, you need to have capital. You need to have money that you can use to actualize your business ideas, to bring them into existence, to make them true. So in the same way here, we need this ethical conduct, we need this behavior to accumulate enough merit to fulfill this aspiration to become enlightened. But that's not the only thing you need. You also need to remove whatever is in the way to become enlightened. And that is with the tool of wisdom. The wisdom that is diametrically opposed to the misapprehension of reality, which is the root of samsara. Let me just stress that as well yesterday. I said it's not just, the root of samsara is not just a mind that's just not knowing how phenomena exist. No, it's a mind that on top of not knowing how phenomena exist, it actually is diametrically opposed. The way it apprehends things is the opposite of how they exist. So that is the root of all our trouble. That's what keeps us from being liberated. That's what keeps us from being enlightened. So that needs to be cut by wisdom. But this wisdom needs to be really focused. It needs to be a direct experience, but a direct experience that, of course, is combined with the deep concentration so that the mind is not distracted here and there, but just focused on emptiness. And that kind of, that arm, that's like this concentration called calm abiding, and then the wisdom realizing emptiness, the arm and the knife, but that's held by the activities of the bodhisattva. That's held by the motivation to become enlightened, and then this assisting merit, the assisting training in ethical conduct, the conduct of a bodhisattva, for the knife and the hand to be led towards the right thing that needs to be cut. Okay, so the person kind of leads the wisdom in the right direction. That's what I want to cut. Not just the obscurations to liberation, but also to enlightenment. And how is this done? Through four stages, with the last stage, then the fifth stage being enlightenment. So 5 paths, if you like, 4 unenlightened stages, and then the last stage, which is the enlightened stage of a Buddha, called the 5 path. Okay, 5 stages, 5 paths. What marks the first stage? The wish to become enlightened. First, you want to go somewhere. I mean, you need to know what you want to do spiritually. What is your goal? And like I said, it's the power of the mind. Such is the mind. You need a wish first. You need an aspiration. And then if you accumulate the right causes and conditions, you can actualize that goal. All right, that's the wish to become enlightened. Now, that in itself won't be enough. Of course, now you need to do what's necessary. Accumulate merit. I've already mentioned it. So engage in the ethical conduct of a bodhisattva. Therefore, on the first level, so the first level is the path of accumulation. The path of accumulation, you have generated bodhicitta. Then it's subdivided in 3 levels again, where you enhance further. We don't need to go into details on this, but at least the second level. So it's called the middling path of accumulation. That's when you take, for instance, the bodhisattva vow. You have to take it. You could have taken it before, but that's at the latest that you take the bodhisattva vow, definitely on the middling stage. So You make it even stronger. You make this promise, basically, as in the form of a vow to now work for the benefit of all sentient beings. At that level, actually, your bodhicitta cannot be lost. You can no longer lose it. Okay, previously you could, but you can no longer lose it. But that being the path of accumulation, maybe you've already realized emptiness before, great, but just realizing emptiness, just understanding emptiness is not enough. It's just a conceptual understanding, which is not sufficient. And what else you need, despite this, on top of this conceptual understanding, the mind needs to be very focused, very focused. What you need is therefore concentration, a deep state of concentration described as karma binding. And that you train also, unless you've already attained it, but let's assume you haven't, on the path of accumulation. At the latest, you have to practice this now. Attain that deep level of concentration, which enables you to stay focused on one object with clarity of mind and deep focus for at least 4 hours, not 4 minutes, 4 hours. That kind of concentration, which is totally possible if you do the right practices. And then you train yourself with the understanding of emptiness, the understanding, when this all happens on the path of accumulation, unless this happened before, but at the latest on that level. You train yourself, okay, concentration. And while you're concentrated, you can't focus on emptiness. So you come out of this deep concentration, focus on emptiness, you focus on the breath or another object, focus on emptiness, go back to the concentration. So you alternate those two until you can bring the two together, that with one mind, you're deeply focused, but at the same time, you focus on emptiness. There's like a slight form of analysis taking place, described as like a still lake with a little fish moving underneath the surface without disturbing the surface. That is called the union of calm abiding and special insight. Union of calm abiding, that special concentrated state, and special insight, the mind realizing emptiness. They have now been combined in one mind. Both functions are present in this one mind. And with that, you realize emptiness, not directly, it's still a conceptual mind, but you realize emptiness. And the first moment of that mind marks the first moment of the path of preparation. Okay, so now you've entered with bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is already there, has been there since you entered the path of accumulation, can no longer be lost, of course. And now you've gone through the levels, small, middling, great, of the path of accumulation. And now you enter the path of preparation with this union of calm abiding and special insight, conceptually realizing emptiness. What do you do on that level? You weaken the root of samsara. You cannot eliminate it yet, but you undermine it. You weaken it. It's no longer as strong as it was previously. You cannot yet realize it directly because you haven't realized, you cannot eliminate it yet because you haven't realized emptiness directly yet. So this union of calm abiding and special insight is still a conceptual mind. However, you go through 4 stages, don't need to go through those, as part of the path of preparation. And you train, of course, in that union of calm abiding and special insight, realizing emptiness, until that mind that is previously conceptual becomes now a direct realizing mind, a direct perceiving mind, or a direct realization of emptiness. Still that union of calm abiding and special insight, of course. And with that direct experiencing mind, the first moment of that marks the first moment of the path of seeing. Direct experience. It's combined with bodhicitta, of course. So now through the force of bodhicitta, it starts eliminating whatever is in the way to enlightenment. But you start off with the coarser, the rougher kind of obstructions. You start off with the afflictive emotions, in particular, the misapprehension of reality, that is the root of samsara, which you acquired in this life, which is intellectually acquired. It's not just it's not the innate one. The innate you don't tackle yet, you don't remove yet, but it's the intellectually acquired. You remove that. Okay, you do that on the path of seeing. That's the main function of the path of seeing. And then you rise from the meditative absorption that has eliminated them in one go. You rise from that accumulate merit, do other things. And when you go again into this, you enter again a meditative absorption, directly realizing emptiness. On that level, you've now reached the path of meditation. When you go into it again and now start removing the innate afflictive emotions, so you totally eliminate them. And on the path of meditation, you have 10 subdivisions, and these 10 subdivisions in each of those 10 levels, or 10 bhumis as they're called, 10 grounds, these 10 levels, 10 bhumis, you eliminate every time one of those innate afflictions until the 7th bhumi. On the 7th level of the path of meditation, you've eliminated the subtlest afflictive emotions and you're liberated. You're now a liberated person. But you don't stop there. You want to strengthen your knife. You want to sharpen your knife even further with the bodhicitta. So bodhicitta now, like we had this discussion, asked this question before. So how does this happen? So really it's bodhicitta. You're not done yet. There's more to cut through to attain the enlightened state of a Buddha, more to remove from your mind. And now the wisdom is, because of bodhicitta, is now such that you can now, the power of the mind is such that you can now utilize this wisdom to cut even further, to cut the obstructions to liberation, which are like as Rinpoche described it, the smear, the defilements, the impurities left on the mind, left even after the afflictive emotions are still there. So you cut through them. These are called the cognitive obscurations, all happening on the 8th, 9th, and 10th level of the path of meditation. And when you eliminated the subtlest, then the moment it's gone, you're a Buddha. That's the path of no more learning. Okay, so that was a very quick version of what Rinpoche said. Well, Rinpoche even was shorter. I mean, you can give that much explanation. But anyway, hopefully that's a little clearer. And of course, you can learn about this. There are lots of material available on exactly this, the 5 path, the grounds and path. Okay, well, a lot of material in Tibetan, less so in English. Anyway, going back to yesterday's class, now we got to, and here is just briefly, just not to lose, and I won't give you an extensive explanation, but the text itself is, of course, a text on emptiness. It deals with emptiness and dependent arising. And first there's an homage, a promise to compose the text. Then there's a short summary introducing the mother, emptiness, and the brother as a reasoning that enables us, that allows us the coarser level of dependent arising that helps us to understand emptiness. Okay, that's in the summary explained. Then in the more extensive explanation, that includes, well, first of all, understanding all phenomena or manifestation of emptiness. So the author here explains everything lacks inherent existence. Nothing exists inherently. Whatever exists is empty of inherent existence. That's the mother, okay, that was with us at all times. We just didn't realize it. And that with this, it's possible to become liberated from samsara. Release from samsara is possible if we just understand the mother. Now that's explained. And then the reason for why that is so, that is also explained. Changkya explains, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé, the author, he explains that. Having explained that, well, now comes the point where you recognize the verses that help us to recognize that all phenomena are manifestations not just of emptiness, but also of dependent arising. And in that way, you introduce the father. Okay, so not just the brother, which doesn't deal with the subtlest level of dependent arising, a coarser level, which helps us to understand emptiness, but with the father. The father, on one hand, the dependently arisen conventional truth, okay, that are inseparable from their own emptiness, but also the father as the deepest level of dependent arising, which again cannot be separated from emptiness. In fact, they're inseparable in the sense that you in order to realize emptiness correctly, you need dependent arising, and in order to understand dependent arising correctly, you need emptiness. So in that they assist each other. Understanding emptiness, understanding dependent arising, it depends on each other. So they're inseparably linked. That's the next part that the text describes. And then the text starts to identify the nature of emptiness, how to realize emptiness, really. And Rinpoche gave you a meditation yesterday in which he explained exactly that. That's verse 8, just if you're interested. So it tells us, it teaches the methods to realizing emptiness, as the meditation Rinpoche did yesterday. And Rinpoche explained it by way of giving you 4 points. First point, identifying the object of negation. Second point, having identified the object of negation, understanding the pervasion, ascertaining the pervasion. In other words, what's the object of negation? Inherent existence. So taking inherent existence of the I, that's what you try to recognize. Rinpoche explained that extensively. Now that I, you now determine, it's called the ascertaining the pervasion, that if this I exists, since whatever exists, its I is either one with its parts or different from its parts, well, now you determine if such an inherently existent I existed, it would have to be one with its parts or different from its parts. That's the second point you need to do. Determine there's no other possibility. The third point is now to negate that this inherently existent I, the object of negation, that exists as one with its parts. That's the third kind of point, or the third aspect. And then lastly, you refute, you negate that this I exists as different, as different, as like separate from the aggregates, from its parts, from mind and body. Yeah, that's the fourth point. And then based on that, you're then able to realize emptiness. One thing I want to remark, and that may also clarify something Rinpoche said in an earlier class, I think it was 2 classes ago, not yesterday, but last week, Rinpoche spoke about the fact that if you don't find the I, that does not yet mean emptiness. Okay, in what way? In what way does that, what do we mean with this? As I explained last time, when you use a reason, a logical reason, the logical reason is just described. The I doesn't exist inherently because it's neither inherent, it's neither one with its parts nor different than its parts. So that reason, it's a sign, it's a reason, it's a proof that eventually proves emptiness. But first you need to understand that proof. You need to understand that. And once you've understood that, once you've understood that the I, the inherently existent I, is neither one with its parts nor different from its parts, then as a next step, reflecting on what you've understood again and again, then you realize emptiness. So that means there's a time gap in between. First, you understand the reason, and then based on that, you understand there's nothing from the side of the object. So in other words, this non-findability, you don't find an I, it's not one with its parts, it's not different from its parts. So having gone over this again and again, that kind of non-findability in the sense of, well, one example being neither one with its part nor different from its parts. You could take other reasonings as well, but taking that as an example. So you don't find this I within its parts, not as one, not as different. You may add, like I said, a few other aspects. It's not the collection of its parts and so forth. So anyway, then there's a time gap in that you, again, go over this reasoning. How does it relate back and forth? Is whatever is, you need to kind of go back to, well, since it doesn't exist as one and different from its parts, it can't exist inherently, etc. So having done that, eventually then you realize emptiness. So there's this time gap. Okay. Anyway, having said that, hopefully not having confused you further, this is what is described, basically implied in verse 8. That is when you identify the nature of emptiness. And then the author goes on to say, well, and how did I come to understand that? With the help of Nagarjuna, with the help of Chandakirti, Lama Tsongkhapa. It was the wind of their scriptures, the bird of Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation that brought this explanation to me. And the next part then, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé addresses is, well, refuting mistakes. We need to be careful about not misunderstanding emptiness. And so he describes the 4 philosophical the four philosophical systems other than the Prasangika school. So what do they set forth and how what they say is not correct? And he also describes the other Tibetan Buddhist systems that follow the Prasangika school, yes, but they describe emptiness slightly differently. And he's not at all criticizing them. It's important to understand that he's not criticizing their system. He's criticizing those who misunderstand the system, kind of saying, be careful, watch out. He starts off with the tradition he follows himself in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Gelugpa tradition, saying, well, we need to not be caught up in the words and look at emptiness as separate from ourselves. That's one criticism or one warning he basically gives. But being such a learned master, and that becomes clear from his biography, he studied the other traditions. He studied the Gelug tradition, the other traditions, and he said, well, there's also danger with the other traditions that tend to stress more the emptiness. Conventional truth are not stressed to the same degree. So whereas in the Gelugpa system, there's more of a danger to fall into the extreme of reification. Here can be danger of falling to the extreme of nihilism, because there's so much emphasis to not apprehending anything, the purity, the innate, the uncontrived, and so forth. And he's kind of warning anyone following any of the systems, be careful that you don't fall into an extreme. Be careful that you follow the instructions of your teacher exactly, go through the right meditations and so forth, so that you don't move away from emptiness. All right, this is where we got to last time. And verse 17, Rinpoche went over it again, but really just saying with regard to the philosophical systems. So as you remember, he addressed the philosophical systems, he addressed the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. As to the philosophical schools that were taught by the Buddha himself as like stepping stones to understanding the highest view, well, you have the Vaibhashika and the Vaibhashika and the Satantrika, addressing those two together. Well, what do they believe? That the foundation of all phenomena, really, I mean, they negate a certain type of I, at least a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. Rinpoche explained it like a inherent kind of like a controller that is not that doesn't have to rely on the aggregates, but the aggregates having to rely on this controller, the sense of such an I. So they negate that, certainly with regard to the self. They don't negate inherent existence of the I, but they negate a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, as just mentioned. And then with regard to all other phenomena, the things around us, well, they believe they truly exist the way they appear. And they very much put emphasis on a partless particle, like the building blocks of this external world. You have partless particles. You have these particles that you can no longer divide physically or mentally. And they're the foundation of everything. That's even scientifically, it doesn't make sense. That's impossible. And of course, the higher Buddhist philosophical schools would not assert that, would not accept that. Anyway, that's their view in terms of the physical world. And then on a mental basis, they also accept that there's the smallest moment in time when it comes to perception. So again, the smallest moments, you can't divide time endlessly. For them, that would mean you lose everything. No, there needs to be something very solid. Can't divide things up endlessly, neither particles nor the mind. Okay, that's their view. And so Changkya Rölpai Dorjé said, come on, I mean, that we don't take on. We do still believe there's an external world. We don't negate that. So Vaibhashika and Satantrika, don't worry, but there's no way they're partless particles. That we cannot take on, but there's an external world. The next philosophical system is that of the Chittamatra, or mind only, which negates external existence, and it only focuses on mind. There's great focus on just mind, and that the external world as it appears to us is just an appearance of the mind. It's just an appearance to the mind, I should say. Therefore, everything that exists is determined by mind. And of course, the question that arises, what determines the existence of the mind itself? Well, there's a part of the mind that looks at itself. That's what the Chitta Matra school says. I mean, otherwise, it's very important that they establish this kind of, as it's called, reflexive awareness or self-knowing awareness, saying each mind is kind of looking at itself. That's not introspection. That's not what we call introspection. Introspection means one mind observes another mind. Okay, that's of course possible. Prasangika would not deny that. But that every mind, an eye consciousness, any type of mind, kind of looks at itself? No, that doesn't happen. This is what the Prasangika school, which Changkya Rölpai Dorjé follows, refutes, saying, no, these kind of self-knowers don't exist as you describe them. They don't exist. There's mind, yeah, of course, but there's also an external world. Okay, so don't worry, he basically says there's still objects, there's still mind, but this kind of, the self-knower, we don't accept. Then he addresses the Svatantrika saying, well, do you believe that everything exists inherently, as the other schools do too, by the way, but here it's specifically a point that's emphasized. Phenomena exist inherently, well, and dependently. And Prasangika school, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé is saying, well, no, yeah, phenomena do exist. They exist in dependence. Yes, we don't deny that, but not inherently. Okay, so in that way, he says, we take from every school something, from every philosophical school, we accept something. And it's, of course, it's like a stepping stone to understanding the highest view. So there's something we accept and something we learn, but there's certain aspects we refute, we negate in order to come to the highest view. All right. Then he addresses the, in verse, so that was verse 17. Then in verse 18 and 19, he addresses those who misapprehend, who misperceive the Sakya, Nyingma, and Kagyu tradition, who kind of don't understand what it actually refers to. So, for instance, in the Sakya school, what is described is the fact clarity and emptiness, phenomena being clear and empty. That's very much emphasized, and the union of the two. So clarity as in like the nature of the mind, and emptiness as the nature of the body. So the nature of the nature of the mind, that's clarity, and the nature of the ultimate nature of the mind, that's emptiness. And so those being inseparably linked. But that doesn't mean, and also that there's very much the emphasis in the Sakya system of not apprehending anything. So you have the union of those two, clarity and emptiness, and very much the emphasis on not apprehending anything. Because apprehending something is associated with apprehending things as existing inherently. This the sense like you apprehend something, right away you grasp at inherent existence, which in the Gelugpa system, it's the same thing, but the emphasis is it's not expressed in that same way. So therefore, actually, the meaning is the same, but it's described slightly differently. And so Changkya Rölpai Dorjé says, those who may misunderstand what the Sakya school says, well, be clear, there's still apprehension of things. It's not that phenomena don't exist. Let me just look where it's at. Yeah, so there is clarity and emptiness, no problem, but still, there's still conventional truth. Of course, there's this whole lineage, like the pupil instruction lineage, that still exists. So don't misunderstand that. Likewise, in the Nyingma tradition, again, the emphasis being on purity, on focusing very much on emptiness, the ultimate nature, being primordially pure, in particular in the context of Dzogchen, which is the most advanced kind of Nyingma practice, again, emphasizing how phenomena don't exist, emptiness. So don't misunderstand that. Again, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé is saying, of course, there's also conventional good and bad, positive, still relative, of course, positive and negative, etc. Still not saying there's nothing there. Don't misunderstand that. And in particular, also with regard to the Kagyu tradition, here Rinpoche gave a really difficult explanation, but since, of course, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé mentions Mahamudra, which is the deepest level of the highest practice, if you like, the deepest, the most difficult practice in the Kagyu tradition, again, and it's actually just as Dzogchen in Nyingma tradition, and also as the Sakya, of course, it's the tantric aspect of realizing emptiness. So here again, very much emphasis on things being uncontrived and innate and so forth. Again, don't misunderstand this. It's not saying that there's nothing there, but also something else that is stressed. So this is, for instance, a view that is a little different between the Gelug and the Kagyu tradition, possibly, that in the Kagyu tradition, when you realize emptiness conceptually, there is this tendency to say, well, that's not emptiness, only when you realize emptiness directly. Now, in the Gelug tradition, slightly different. They would say, well, it is emptiness, but that's just not enough. Now, what you realize in the end, whether you call it emptiness or not, you realize the same thing. In the end, it's just words are used slightly differently. But here it's kind of to do with that. So what Rinpoche explained was, in the Kagyu tradition, they say it's this uncontrived, deepest mind that realizes emptiness directly. This clear light, deepest mind, the subtlest level of consciousness that is described in the tantric system, not in the non-tantric sutric system, only in the tantric system. Only that is the real mind that realizes the ultimate nature of phenomena. That's this uncontrived mind. And in response to that, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé argues, well, no, not just that clear light mind, not just the clear light mind that realizes emptiness directly, which in the Gelug tradition is called the meaning clear light mind. Not just that, but also the example clear light mind, the mind that is the deepest level of mind that conceptually realizes emptiness. Even that realizes emptiness. So that is already getting at the ultimate nature. Now, Rinpoche just very quickly explained it. I'm sure not everyone understood what he said, but he basically, and just to say in a few words, said that we can, through certain techniques, we can actualize the subtlest level of mind. At the time of death, it definitely actualizes the clear light mind of death. But even through meditation, you can actualize this mind. You can bring it to the forefront, as in like the coarser levels, they're no longer active, and the subtlest level gets activated through certain meditations that are very difficult, and we can't do them right now, but he briefly explained them. Really what you do through concentration, deep levels of concentration, deep levels of focus, you are able to bring the wind in the energy of your body. Our whole body is pervaded by energy, very subtle energy. You bring this towards the core of your being, towards the center. So from the periphery of your body, you bring it towards what's called the central energy channel that goes through the center of your body, and bringing it inside. So these energy winds enter the central channel, they abide in there and dissolve in the central channel, and you bring them together so that they in the central channel, so that they open the capsule, if you like, at your heart, in which the very subtle mind is active. So open it in the sense that now your subtle mind actually becomes activated. And this mind is now the only mind that is active in your continuum. And you use that now to realize emptiness. But when you do this initially, it's a conceptual mind. And in the according to Changkya Rölpai Dorjé, saying that mind realizes emptiness, but it's not the end of it. That's just called the example clear light mind. It's not the actual clear light mind we're aiming for, but it's still a clear light mind. And that's what Rinpoche very quickly explained yesterday. I'm not sure everyone caught it. But anyway, the point being that in the Kagyu tradition, they would say it's only this uncontrived mind that meaning clear light that realizes emptiness, that subtlest mind that realizes emptiness directly, only that realizing emptiness. And then Changkya Rölpai Dorjé says, well, actually, or even that contrived mind, that conceptual mind, it's actually getting at emptiness. Okay, so there's just a different way of explaining it, which is the text says that with the words. Let me just look at the verse. So here, since the innate nature can dawn through even contrived meditation, you elderly meditators not be persistent. So don't insist that you don't get an emptiness at this point. Anyway, that's Changkya's view here. And so then it goes on to say, he then addresses the Shangsamba. The Shangsamba, they're not mentioned much. Many of you have probably not heard of them. They were followers of Patsab Lotsawa. So Patsab Nimata, he was the translator of entry into the middle way. He's quite famous for that, and he was a great master. He translated Entering into the Middle Way by Chandakirti, for instance, but he was also a great master, a great scholar. And one of his followers was Shang Tangsamba. And he's particularly, so there's this whole notion of like stressing emptiness. It's not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, and always just negating things. It doesn't exist. It's not non-existence. It's not both. It's not. And so here, Changkya is saying, well, just a little, we're not saying that emptiness is an affirm negation. We're not saying when you realize emptiness, everything appears to your mind. No, but just negating everything, well, there's still a conventional truth. We can at least talk about it. So he's kind of slightly critical of Shang Tangsamba. All right, so that was verse 19. Now, this criticism is a little bit tricky. It's always easy to criticize your own tradition if you're part of it, kind of say, watch out. Here, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé, of course, he starts off with, he's not critical as such, but he's saying, watch out, those who just get caught up in the words. He's not criticizing in general the tradition, but just those who misunderstand it. 3 verses he uses to criticize that, right? Or to warn of that. Now, with the other traditions, there has been in the past sometimes slight disagreement between or great disagreement between those different philosophical schools, which some people, well, actually, from the point of view of those masters who set forth these traditions, who practice these traditions, there've never been disagreement. They understood the words are different, yes, but the meaning is the same. Not talking about the real practitioners, but those following those traditions, seeing the differences, but not understanding them, just different verbal expressions, so not being aware of that and using it sometimes for their own political purposes. There have been actual political problems in Tibet that were done that happened in the name of those different traditions. Okay, that happened. It's just a human phenomenon. We had it in other countries, Catholics against the Protestants and so forth. It has happened in Tibet as well, but that was not started by the masters themselves, but by just followers not understanding those traditions correctly and using it for their own means. So there is this difficulty, and one tries to be really careful not to criticize other traditions so that doesn't flare up. I mean, in any situation, it's important to be careful. And that's what he does in verse 20, therefore. He's saying, well, all of what I said, I mean, what I said here was not to offend you or to be disrespectful. I'm just addressing those who believe they're scholars of any types of the traditions. So by some wanting in erudition, wanting scholarship, and their use of conventions are not done in the proper way. So they've not understood, they've got caught up in the words, and they may have fallen into one of the extremes. But please understand, I didn't mean disrespect. Do forgive me if I cause offense. So I think that verse is important to understand. He's not criticizing any of the different traditions. All right, so I think that's pretty clear. With time, okay. And then he goes on to say, so that was verse 20. And then he talks about how he himself has sought the profound dependent arising, emptiness dependent, but here more the focus is on dependent arising. So which text did I use? And that's verse 21, the verses the text that he used himself. Now, this is, and Rinpoche expressed it in that way. Why does he talk about this now? And he's just saying this, if now those who've just been, well, warned, if you like, or criticized, or not really criticized, but those he addressed previously, if now they say, well, what about you then? You Changkya Rölpai Dorjé, you're telling us this is not, we have to be careful here and there. well, do you know yourself what you're talking about, basically? And he says, well, no, I'm not omniscient. I don't know. I do have some understanding. So some self-confidence is expressed here, because he says, I believe I've learned to ride the well-bred horse of my ancestors' works. And I think it also includes probably understanding that although the words are different in the different traditions, they're expressing the same emptiness. So the commentaries, they very much emphasize that. Of course, the great masters, as they set forth, as they gave these different explanations of emptiness using different terminology, although the terminology is different, the meaning is the same. I mean, you can express the same thing with different words. Okay, that's true for everyday kind of objects, for everyday kind of phenomena. Now, likewise, he's saying emptiness can be expressed in different ways. And let's not forget, these different traditions were set forth at different times by different masters. So words change, vocabulary changes. I mean, we can see it nowadays from year to year, different words are used more, other ones less. So that accounts for that. And of course, these explanations that they passed on in the Kagyu Nyingma Sakya and Gelug tradition, they actually originated in India. So they had these explanations were around in India, and they were brought from India by different masters, again, from different kind of ways of expressing or different emphasis in terms of how things were explained, etc., different practices. And they were all brought together to Tibet at different times and evolved parallel to each other. And oftentimes practitioners, great practitioners, they benefited from all of them. They learned them, they really understood them and realized the meaning was the same. So all this is part of this here saying, I don't know everything, but I'm riding the horse of my ancestors' work, Nagarjuna. Of course, Nagarjuna, the five great masters, Nagarjuna, Ayadeva, Bhava, Viveka, Chandakirti, Nagarjuna, Bhava, Viveka, do I have five? Ayadeva, Buddha Palita, Bhava, Viveka, Chandakirti, and Nagarjuna. Yeah, so these five masters. And basically the different Tibetan traditions, they also follow those five masters. Those we should follow to really understand emptiness. Look, let's go back to basic. Let's go back to the basic in the sense, let's go back to the origin where it comes from. And so I myself, he says, with the self-confidence, I've learned to ride this well-bred horse, this well-worked through work of my ancestors, like a horse are taking me. So Nagarjuna and so forth, these great masters, their work, I'm using them. They're like a horse that take me towards enlightenment. And so I hope to traverse, I hope to overcome all the challenging passages, all the difficulties through what? Constant and dedicated striving. So that's important for us to practice. It needs to be dedicated. We need to be determined and constant, not just determined one day and the next we give up. No, we need to strive. It takes time, effort, determination. All right. So that's what I've done, following Nagarjuna, and of course, then also in the Tibetan tradition, Lama Tsongkhapa. Okay. And then it goes on to say, now, what do I find? Having sought, now what am I finding? In verse 22, well, I don't need to look far. And it's similar to what we said before. Emptiness is not over there like a monster with horns. Actually, what we're seeking, so the seeker is the mind, and that itself, so it's not required to seek it somewhere else, but it's the mind itself. The mind itself seeks its own lack of inherent existence. So you don't need to look far. It's inseparably linked to the mind. The mind here, in this case, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé's own mind, and in our case, our own mind. And so never grasp at the emptiness. Never grasp at dependently arisen phenomena. So there's emptiness on one hand, but inseparably linked, of course, from the basis, the dependently arisen phenomena. Don't grasp them as true, as the ultimate truth, even dependent arising, that's not the ultimate truth. Why? Because it appears in the way in which it doesn't exist. Understand that that is false, but don't ignore it. Although it's false, it does accord with reality. Okay. And so, therefore, eventually we can rest in this, that there's neither nothing nor the absolute. So together with the mother and father, mother emptiness, father dependent arising, we can come to understand that there is no nothingness, there's dependent arising, and there is no absolute reality because there's emptiness, the ultimate truth. Okay. And lastly, coming towards the end, remembering those through whose kindness the finding was accomplished. So what did I find? Well, emptiness, dependent arising. And now I remember those because I understand I'm a dependently arisen phenomenon. I didn't figure it out on my own, right? I mean, arrogance is usually a tendency where we think I did it all on my own. So previously he's kind of expressing his self-confidence saying, well, I did learn to ride the horse of dependent arising. And anyway, I forgot to say something with the horse previously. He did when he said he was sorry if he offended anyone, but he's saying if you ride a horse, as you use this horse, well, it does get you somewhere. In this case, the horse almost like you tell the truth, you tell what you say, what you think, but you will still trample some flowers. You may offend people. I thought it was like a nice poetic way of saying, well, on one hand, you're riding this, in this case, the horse of truth, but of course, as a side effect, you may trample on people. And that was not my intention. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. And the next is then the well-bred horse. And in this case, it's the works of my ancestors. He uses the analogy a little differently. Forgot to mention that. But anyway, going back to those last verses, the kind of verses where he now is basically saying, previously in verse 22, he was saying, yes, I have this self-confidence. I did, so not 22, 20, 21. Yes, 21. He's saying, yeah, well, I'm not omniscient, but I did understand. I have understood this. I have this self-confidence. But he's not arrogant. Why is he not arrogant? Because what does arrogance mean? And arrogance means that your success, you believe that's just you, that's just me. I'm so great. I'm so proud of what I've accomplished. Arrogance has this, you lose dependent arising in that you're not proud of everyone else who helped you with this, but you just believe all the credit can be given to yourself. I mean, you've done it on your own. But actually, in order to overcome arrogance, of course, you can still have self-confidence, but also understand everyone involved in that. Right. So it's not, of course, that was my own effort, but my parents, my teachers, everyone who facilitated these teachers and my parents and so forth. So in a way, directly or indirectly, well, possibly all of humanity or other living beings were all in a way involved. So to remember that kindness, to appreciate what they've done. So here, where was I? Oh, yes. So now he first talks about, of course, my mother, though I may not have seen my mother directly. So emptiness itself, I feel I found my mother. So I haven't seen her directly yet. So I'm only having a conceptual understanding. I haven't seen her directly, but I have some conceptual understanding. So it feels like I found her. In fact, my long lost parents, because both I found them. Emptiness, dependent arising on the deepest level. And so it's through hearing their mere names, it's like they're right here beside me. So just hearing it, I don't need much. It's now I'm familiar. I've become more familiar with it. So just hearing it, it's like they're there right with me. But it's the great kindness of course, Nagarjuna, his heirs, Ayadeva, Buddha Palita, Baba Viveka, Ayad Chandakirti, and so forth, and his own personal. It comes later. So the great Indian masters, in other words. And then great indeed is the kindness of Lama Tsongkhapa, so the great Tibetan masters, including, of course, Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Gelug tradition. And of course, his own personal guru, my own personal guru. So here's like expressing this kindness. It's because of them. I've now finally be able to realize this, and to repay their kindness, I will honor my mother. which is another way of saying I will practice emptiness, my mother, and I'll offer it to honor them. I offer this to my great teachers, which is the offering of practice. Rinpoche spoke about it yesterday briefly. He said the greatest offering we can make, there's the offering of material objects, there's the offering of service, for instance, offering respect. All these are offerings and they're great. But the best offering we can make is the offering of our own practice. That's what pleases them, our teachers, our lamas, our masters the most. Okay, so first he praises them and he says, this is what I offer you. I honor my mother, okay, to repay their kindness. All right. And at the very end, of course, dedicating the positive potential, the virtue he's accumulated now as the person who's holding the knife. It's got an arm that's karma binding, and the knife wisdom. Now you practice what the training in ethical conduct, which is really engaging in the actions of a bodhisattva, which includes this here with the motivation. You start off with the motivation of bodhicitta. So his action, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé's action, became actions of a bodhisattva. And so now he's dedicating that virtue towards what? Enlightenment, of course. So through the joyous celebration of all noble deeds, in particular with this in this context, through the meeting of the young child, his own mind, he himself in the sense of like, well, basically the mind, that's the main aggregate. It's not saying the I is the mind, but that's the main aggregate. So the mind is that young child, young in the sense, haven't found my mother yet, totally immature. Emptiness has been with me all the time, but in that sense, spiritually, he calls himself spiritually immature, if you like, as a child. Now has met the mother with his unborn as emptiness is permanent. So unborn is not born from causes and conditions, and inexpressible. As Rinpoche said yesterday, well, not literally, you can't talk about it inexpressible, but you can never express it the way it's directly perceived. You can't put it into words. Okay, so it has to be directly experienced. Otherwise, just words won't get us there. This aging mother, in the sense, has always been with us, has always been with me. And may all mother beings, mother sentient beings who at some point in the past have been our mother in a different sense here. The word mother is used in different contexts. Here, literally, everyone has at some point been so kind to me, has been my mother's. May they all be led to lasting joy. And then at the very end, he rejoices himself, like a dance of joy. It's almost like the Heart Sutra at the end. It's also like, oh, in the end, everyone was happy and rejoiced. That's how the Heart Sutra finishes. So here also like Emma, Aho, these expressions of words of amazement. So I, Rölpai Dorjé, the author, I perform here and now a dance of ecstatic joy and worship the three jewels. Aho, worship the three jewels. Okay. This is how Rinpoche, we did exactly an hour, so we got there last time. I don't know what Rinpoche will do next time. Possibly take more questions or go over some of the more difficult points again. But hopefully I was able to, integrate what Rinpoche said yesterday, some of the more difficult points, as well as go through the text in such a way that it's easier understood. And of course you have commentary in English now, that should definitely help. Be aware the words are sometimes different, that the same words are translated in the Tibetan are also part of the root text, but because Jeffrey Hopkins uses different words from Geshe Jimba, who translated the root text, there may be some difference, but really they're explaining the same thing. Great, okay, that's it. So we're done with the review class, and now we have time for questions. Am I still
so much.
An hour? Did I go for an hour? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Please, if you have
Thank you so much, Geshe. Thank you so much. We have a question from Christine. Christine, could you please unmute?
Hello.
Hello, Christine.
Oh, thank you very so much for these teachings. They've been brilliant. My question is, it's very difficult to find very authentic and correct teachings in books. There's so much writing on different things. Can you advise some reading material, more maybe specifically on the path of preparation, of seeing, etc., what you were talking about at the beginning of the session today?
Okay. That's a little difficult. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That is a little difficult because in English there isn't that much available. There's, for instance, a book by Jeffrey Hopkins. It's called Meditation on Emptiness. It's kind of one of the older books. It's a little forgotten almost sometimes, but it's brilliant. I mean, every now and then I go back to that, and it's such a great source. And he did a really wonderful job, I believe, setting forth some of the more important aspects, such as the path, for instance. So that would be a good book to go back to. Any book by Geshe Tsering. Did he do anything on the grounds and path? I'm not sure he did. But there's someone called Geshe Tsering. He's Tashi like Tashi, 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 and then Tsering, Tsering, and he's a Geshe, so Geshe Tashi Tsering, Geshe Geshe. He's got great books. There's a whole series of books. They're not extremely long, but very precise, very good. See whether you find something on the path and grounds, as I just described it. Then any book by His Holiness, though I'm not sure His Holiness, if they're mentioned every now and then, but I haven't seen it, a book on it specifically. But any book by His Holiness can always be relied on. Then there's a nun called Tibetan Children from the United States. She also brought out quite a few books together with His Holiness, or also relying on what His Holiness the Dalai Lama has taught. She's got a whole series of great books, and they mention these paths again and again, but they also give you a whole background information. So Tibetan Children's books are very helpful. Tibetan, THUBTEN. Anyway, anyone who's got any suggestions, so here for those who are listening, you could just post it in the chat. If you have other suggestions about books, please post them in the chat, and then Christine took the children. Great, B just wrote it, perfect. And any other books that you may suggest, and Christine, before the end of this session, if you just check every now and then the chats, maybe someone else recommends your books on that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay.
May I recommend Geshe herself has taught a course at Tushita called The Grounds and Path. So there is course material with it, and it's on our website. So you can just go on our website, look under courses, and there it is. I think that must have been maybe 3 years ago, Geshe, something like that. Yeah. So it was an intensive course, I think 12, 13 days, and each day like 5-6 hours of teaching. So you could listen to that.
All right. Okay. Some other questions?
Not yet, Geshe. Oh, B.
Oh, hi, B.
B, could you please unmute?
Hi.
Hi.
Talking about the grounds and path. In the Gelug system, or at least from what I heard from my Gelug teacher, Bodhisattva stay in meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness, and that's how they move from one ground to the next and to the next.
Okay.
So their object is emptiness, the non-affirming negation emptiness. In other schools that posit a different ultimate truth, they're saying that, ultimate truth cannot be just mere negation. In those schools, what is it? How does it happen for Bhumi? How do they explain Bodhisattva going from one ground to the next?
Okay. The schools, you mean like the Kagyu Sakya Nyingma schools, like traditions?
Yes, any of the school that posit a different ultimate truth. For example, Nibbana has this idea of uncompounded mind, where they say the ultimate truth is more than just emptiness. So for masters like that, how do they describe Bodhisattva going from ground to ground?
Okay. First of all, with regard to what you first described, that a Bodhisattva goes from meditative absorption, within the meditative absorption, then become, and I mean, like moving from one path to the next within the meditative absorption, that needs to be explained, I believe, just not to misunderstand it. Of course, it doesn't mean, and B, you didn't say that, but just someone may misunderstand that. So that the Bodhisattva, as the Bodhisattva moves through the grounds, like first from the path of seeing to the path of meditation. And as you've heard, the path of meditation, there are 10 sub-levels, if you like, 10 grounds, as they're called. It's not saying that they always abide in the meditative absorption. They come out of it, they go back into it, they come out of it, they go back into it. However, there is some explanation where it says that every time, actually, for a meditative absorption, why do you generate a meditative absorption? In order to eliminate something, to eliminate one of the obstructions, going subtler and subtler and subtler. Every time you enter a meditative absorption, you remove a subtler type of obstructions. You come out and even subtler. So the 10 grounds of as part of the path of meditation are divided, or they're presented in that way in dependence on what you remove. And so there's this explanation where they say, well, the moment you enter into the meditative absorption, you don't right away, you may not be able to right away eliminate something. There's a short moment, you just focus on emptiness, and then the mind starts eliminating. Then through this process of realizing emptiness directly, obstructions are removed. So there's this first moment where it's called an absorption that is not really an absorption. It's not a real absorption. Although you're directly absorbed into emptiness, since the mind doesn't remove anything, it's called Zampowa in Tibetan. Zampowa is kind of like, it's not the real deal kind of thing. Why? Because you don't start. It's just you realize emptiness directly, but you don't actually, the mind doesn't eliminate anything yet. And then it starts. So the moment it starts, you've entered the next ground. You've started removing again something. So that's the next ground. So you move from one ground to the next, which means, let's say on the third ground, you go back into you enter again. Previously, you had already a meditative absorption that's part of the third ground. Now you came out of it, you eliminated something already, that is, that you eliminate as a bodhisattva on the 10th ground. You eliminated some afflictive obscuration, and now you go back into it. But the first moment, you just realize emptiness directly without eliminating anything. So you're still on the 9th ground, but remaining within that meditative absorption. Then, as the mind starts to eliminate something, in that moment you've entered the 10th ground. So from one absorption, you're within the absorption. You go from the 9th to the 10th ground. Sorry, from the 3rd to the 4th ground, as part of the example I used. So then on the 4th ground, you've reached the 4th ground, you eliminated something, you eliminated, again, a level of certain type of cognitive, certain type of afflictive obscuration. Then you go again into it, but right away you can't eliminate something. You're in a meditative absorption. And the moment the mind starts eliminating a further afflictive obscuration, you move to the 5th level. Okay, so you go from meditative absorption to meditative absorption. That's what it means. I just wanted to make sure this is understood. That's one view. Not everyone agrees with this, but that's one explanation you may have received. Now, with regard to the other traditions, the way they set forth emptiness, we did briefly study the different traditions. However, the real difference between the different traditions, Sakya Kagyu Nyingma, is the tantric difference. The sutric difference is minimal. It's not that great. So what you addressed, like what Joe Mipham, for instance, talked about, he talked about the tantric part, and we didn't study that. We weren't allowed that as part of my studies. We couldn't. We needed to get initiation into these different tantric. And no way we could do this as part of the study. So we only studied the sutric aspect of the explanation they gave. So what you ask is about Tantra. And anyway, in the Gelugpa system also, like there's much more emphasis here also on the mind. The emptiness is the same, but now the mind, what kind of mind is it that you use to realize emptiness? So it's the clear light mind that realizes emptiness directly. Now in the other systems, for instance, Jumibam following the being a master of the Nyingma tradition, well, it would be Dzogchen, but I don't know enough about it. And the little that I know, I don't dare to say anything about it because I don't know whether it's correct. So therefore, it's really, they're talking about Dzogchen. Again, it should be that subtlest clear light mind. I mean, what else would it be? But it just, they describe it differently and saying it's an ultimate truth in that sense. Well, there's definitely also the ultimate truth that the mind is aware of, but they don't talk along those lines. It's explained differently. So my answer is I really don't know. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, I believe it's the same as in the Gelug tradition. It's just expressed differently, but I don't know enough. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
No answer. Okay. Yes. Next question.
Today everybody's shy. Emilia. Emilia, could you please unmute?
Geshema, when we hear and we see pictures of masters in Tukdam and the importance, some days stay for 1 day, others 5 days, and so on. Yes. So my question is, how does that relate with the realization of emptiness? And also, it's more like a curiosity. Why so many great masters, they return in human form? Because we read to aspire to go to Amitabha, but they return. So yeah, these two aspects, please.
Okay, so your question is, I need to explain your question a little bit, just for those who haven't heard of what you just mentioned. So you mentioned this phenomenon called Tukdam, or as it's sometimes in English called the clear light meditation at the time of death. Now, this is something you find in the Tibetan tradition, probably in other traditions, I don't know, in other countries, but in the Tibetan tradition, this is a huge part of all the 4 traditions, Sakya, Nyingma, Kagyu, and if you want to include the Jonang tradition, as it's also usually described. So in all those traditions, you find masters who, after they have clinically died, so they're dead, there's no more heartbeat, there's no more blood circulation, they remain in meditation, which means their body doesn't decay. It remains fresh. Usually when they die, also they die in the position being seated. So they actually die while meditating. So their breath stops, their heart stops. However, they remain within meditation. They remain within meditation such that although the body is dead, the mind hasn't left the body yet. And that's why the body remains fresh. Sometimes for 5 days, sometimes for 3 weeks. And it's a phenomenon that scientists have now developed an interest in. There's been research on this, in that the meditators are being checked and there's only a little bit of warmth left at the heart of such a meditator, at the heart chakra, which explains, or which is typical for the fact that this kind of meditation is what I described earlier, that when a person, a great meditator, oftentimes they can direct their own death, in that even if they're great masters, they may know they have some time to live, but they know this is a good moment to die, because if they're then reborn again, they can benefit people in a specific way. I mean, there's always a reason for these masters. They have learned to control their birth and death. So what they do is when they die, it's very controlled. They can even say, well, I'm going to be last time. They say goodbye to everyone and they basically prepare their death. And later on is very obvious. They knew exactly they were going to die. And they may have even, like I said, controlled their death. This is a good moment for the benefit of all sentient beings. They sit down to meditate. And now death happens. And what I described in the meditation earlier, where you take the energy winds that is moving throughout the entire body, you're now moving it towards the center of the body. This happens naturally at the time of death. So what happens at the time of death? This whole process, the energy enters the central channel, and then the capsule in which the clear light mind is located. There's a location for that clear light mind, or its subtle energy. So that opens, and the clear light mind becomes activated. It's activated. That's true for any sentient being. That's true for us when we talk about walking into the light. Well, it's just the clear light mind, right? It's the clear light mind that's there. And that's the subtlest level, the innermost level of mind. And that's the mind that will continue to become the mind of a Buddha. Unfortunately, we can't and will make it happen because we have these coarse minds due to our afflictive emotions. They're usually active. Only at death and at certain other times they can arise. But really the subtlest mind at the time when we're sleeping, for instance, when we're fainting, a kind of similar to, it's like it's similar to the clear light mind, but it's not as subtle. So those times they do arise, but we can't control it. But at death, that's the best time for that mind to arise. And for us, it comes and it goes. Maybe we remain in this state for 3 days, but an ordinary person doesn't remain longer than 3 days. Sometimes it's just a few moments and we move on. Our consciousness leaves the body, that's subtle mind. But a meditator uses this time, remains in the clear light to now meditate on emptiness with this clear light mind. That's really effective. That's what they do. And that's why the scientists, when they checked a person like that, well, they checked the whole body, definitely dead, no brain activity, no physical, nothing, only a slight warmth in the heart region. Yeah, well, because the mind is active, the subtle energy wind that is associated with the subtle mind, that is still active. So some warmth there, but also no decay. Whatever brings about this decay process hasn't started yet because the consciousness is still there. And then they could go on for a really long time, but they don't want to go on too long because of bodhicitta. They want to be active again. They want to benefit sentient beings. So to remain in that state for very long, well, they're in this meditative absorption, realizing emptiness, well, it could be a conceptual mind, it could be a direct mind, but of course they want to keep on benefiting others. So it doesn't mean if they stay for a really short time, they're not advanced. No, that's sufficient. They don't need more, so they can go on. That was the first question. And the second question was, why they're reborn in the human realm and not born in Abhidhamma? Well, as a bodhisattva, you want to be around those who have a lot of problems. You don't want to kind of take a break and just go to Amitabha, the island where you can just drink cocktails. No. For us as ordinary people, that's a good time because we are distracted by samsara. We are led astray here and there. Oh, I don't want to practice Dharma. I want to have a huge car and 5 houses. And oh, there's so much samsaric pleasure. I'll practice some other time. We put it off as ordinary beings. So for us to be in Amitabha, it's great, right? There's Dharma all around us, less destruction. For us, it's necessary. For bodhisattvas, no. For an advanced bodhisattva, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, doesn't talk much about being reborn in the pure realm, because His Holiness will not choose the pure. He's going to go to the worst places where there's suffering. You know, bodhisattvas go where there's the greatest suffering. And so they go to the human realm. Besides the fact, at a certain level, they can manifest different existences in the pure realm, in the human realm. But even leaving that aside, just talking of just a single person, even then, for us, it's good to be in that environment. For them, it doesn't matter. They can be anywhere. Their practice will continue, and they seek out those who have trouble. So human realm, first choice. Or other realms, not just first, other realms as well. Yeah, that's the reason. Okay. Please, next question. You can unmute yourself. Elisheva. Elisheva. Probably say it wrongly.
I said wrong, yes.
Ellie, okay, Ellie, that's right.
Yes. Maybe it's a little like the same question, but when you reach emptiness, do you still use the conventional I when you're going around with people, or like when you help them, or trying to help when you come to bodhicitta, like you said, just
Okay.
do you still use it, or you don't have it at all?
Okay. All right. First of all, when you mean you reach emptiness, you mean you reach the mind realizing emptiness, right? Emptiness is always there. Yes, yes. Okay. And secondly, well, do you use the conventional I? Well, first of all, what do you think? Once you realize emptiness, do you think the conventional I is still there or not? If you realize emptiness, you think you will disappear, or you will still exist? Like, let's say you realize emptiness, and will you still exist while you realize emptiness? Are you still there?
Yes.
No, I mean, I don't mean right now you're still there. I mean, like when you realize, let's say tomorrow, Ali is going to sit down to meditate in the morning, and boom, it's there. You realize emptiness, okay? In that moment, are you realizing emptiness, or have you just disappeared?
Realizing emptiness.
Okay, so your mind realizes emptiness, right? And what does your body do? It sits probably in your meditation corner, meditation room. So there's a body that's in the lotus position, cross-legged position, right? So there's a body that does something. There's a mind that meditates. So on the basis of that, what do you label? On the basis of mind and body, what do you label? What do you designate?
Emptiness.
What do you call that? No, what do you call this mind and body? You say
conventional truth.
Conventional I, the conventional I. So labeled on the body that's seated in the meditation posture, labeled on the mind, you label I meditate. Not in that moment. While you're meditating, you're not labeling. You're busy with emptiness. Your mind. What does the labeling? It is the mind realizing emptiness, right? But when you arise from it, so you no longer take emptiness, you're thinking, boy, this morning I meditated on emptiness. You're labeling. We're going back to labeling. You don't have to label right now for something to be there. You can label, oh, this morning I meditated on emptiness. So there was a labeling mind, labeling I on the basis of you meditating. So you still continue. There's mind and body. But for your mind in that moment, it wasn't aware of that. It's just emptiness. But the conventional I is still there.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, next question, Christine.
Christine has another question.
Yes.
Hello again.
Yes, hello.
I've had different answers to this question, so I just wondered what your view was.
Okay.
I believe there are 3 sources of refuge in the Vajrayana method of meditating, that there's your guru, your yidam, and the protectors. Mm-hmm. If you don't have access to a human being in this world as your guru, can you use one of the deities as your guru?
Okay. Actually, it is in this world impossible that you don't have access to your guru, because guru doesn't mean you have to talk to them and meet them, right? You could have a guru who you never met in person and who's never met you in person. So you choose someone. Of course, you don't choose just an ordinary person. Let's take the example of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He's definitely guru material. I mean, if anyone, wow, total guru material. I mean, definitely qualified Lama. So you connect to this person on a mental level. It's totally mental. The physical is not important. You can be around His Holiness the Dalai Lama from morning to evening and not connect to His Holiness. You don't need to meet him, right? Marpa, the greatest guru-student relationship, guru-disciple relationship as recorded is Marpa and Milarepa. I mean, Milarepa didn't spend that much time. First, he had to build all these towers. I mean, go to see Marpa over and over and request him, and he was kicked out. And then he had to build these towers and tear them down again. He didn't spend much time with Marpa. And then he received teachings. Finally, all the obscurations had been purified. His master gave him these incredible teachings. He left and to meditate. How much time did he spend with Marpa? Did he really rub shoulders with him all the time? To need to, because it's mental, right? It's total mental. So you need to connect. This is the beauty of it. He doesn't even need WhatsApp, right? It's like his Holiness doesn't have a WhatsApp account. No problem. Okay. I mean, the point is you don't need to be able to communicate with them on a physical level. No, it's an emotional. Through your practice again and again, if you have a yidam that you feel that you're initiated into and you have a connection, inseparable from your Lama. Very important. Inseparable from your Lama. Inseparable from the Buddha. Right? From the protectors, from all the enlightened beings, in other words, here protectors, enlightened protectors. So enlightened beings, inseparable. So you connect to a living being who's around, whose teachings you can receive via the internet, through books, etc. Attending a teaching, even if you're just one of the crowds, you receive direct teachings, and through your visualizations. And I'm saying that's the power of the mind. Do not underestimate the power of your mind. Since you see them as inseparable, you connect to all the yidams, you connect to all the Buddhas, and you receive help in that way through the enlightened energy. That's just the power of the mind. But it's this living person who you can actually listen to, you can see on pictures, whatever. I mean, this person is more present or more accessible than the Buddha, for instance, who's long gone, whose enlightened mind is still there, but this physical form we're not aware of, right? Therefore, the guru is really important in the sense that you connect to a person in that mental way, kind of like communicate with them, kind of like seeking refuge. You can, in the form of prayers, possibly, Your Holiness, I need your support, please help me. I mean, in that simple way of just communicating mentally with this person, making offerings, like the seven-limb prayer. The seven-limb prayer, it's so beautiful. You're doing just that. You're communicating with your Lama. Really important, right? And still be critical, as His Holiness always says, be critical. What does he say? Does it accord with the Dharma or not? You don't have to go with everything, but you connect on a certain level. And that gives you, it's psychologically so important. It gives you this warmth. It gives you this joy. Everything comes alive through this guru. And this guru will know you. If it's His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he knows you, right? No worries. But it's you. You have to step into the sun. You have to step. These lamas are like the sun, and we remain in the shadow. So to connect with them, we have to step out into the sun. So if there's anyone you feel connected to, a qualified Lama, first check, needs to be qualified, and you feel, oh, their teachings, there you have your Lama. There you have your Lama, okay? And then connect with them and don't see them as separate from the Buddhas and so forth. And in that way, there's great benefit. It's not easy, but it's almost sometimes easier to not be around the Lama because we see faults in other people. We have a tendency, oh, that was weird what they did. And so we keep seeing faults where there aren't any, right? Sometimes there are faults, of course, if it's not a fully qualified master, then we may see faults. And even then, okay, see the faults as the faults, but still connect to them in a certain way. But that's too difficult at the beginning. So I think it's easier to find a fully qualified master. And then if you're not always around, then you don't have the tendency, your mind doesn't have the tendency to see, oh, this was weird, this was wrong, and so forth, right? Which just becomes an obstacle to you. That's it. Don't benefit fully. So gurus are all around. The lamas are all around, right? My personal lama, I never see unless the way you do, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Some courses seem to suggest that you have to get permission from your guru to do them or to seek advice from your guru as to what the next stage should be. If you only have a guru as you've described, can you make your own way through reading?
Yes.
And yes.
The reading by this Lama. I mean, it's like this mental communication. It's almost like, please help me to find the answer. I mean, sometimes in my own situation, it's like, I don't know which way to turn and I have a question and I request my Lama, my guru to help me. And somehow it pops up. And at some point I know, maybe the person says something while they're teaching and I go, oh, that's it. I have to be patient sometimes, right? Just wait. But before long, I find, see, there's three things you need to do. Lama Tsongkhapa says there's three things you need to do. You need to accumulate merit, purify negativities, and communicate, supplicate your Lama. Those three, in order to realize emptiness, and that's what it's all about in the end, as Rinpoche stressed so often, you need to do those three. Accumulate merit, purify negativities, and those two don't exclude each other, and communicate with your Lama. And then things will just come. Okay, so this communication, if you have a question, of course, if you have the possibility to ask someone, right? For instance, a great Lama, this next, I mean, also His Holiness, but also Jada Rinpoche as another example, fully qualified master. Well, you can actually go and seek Jada Rinpoche if he's in India or if he happens to be in your own country. And then you could actually say, I would like to rely on you. If you have that connection to this, to Jada Rinpoche, you could actually say, well, ask for permission to follow him and maybe ask advice. That's possible, but not absolutely necessary. You'll see there's the outer guru and the inner guru. You have your inner wisdom is your inner guru. And you bring the two together, as in like the outer guru, your devotion, the way of your practice, basically seeing the Buddha as inseparable and following their teachings, following their advice, that will put you, this connection with the outer guru, though it's mental, it puts you in touch with your inner, right? And in that way, you'll find the answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, sure. All right, Jade.
Jade, could you unmute, Jade?
Thank you for your teachings. I'm picking up on Christine's question,
Yes.
and I think you partially answered it. It needs to be a minimum of a Lama level. Is that for a guru?
Oh, yes. For guru, like guru is just another word. It's just the Sanskrit word for Lama, right? So
Okay.
a Lama should have certain qualifications, right? I mean, there's in the text, His Holiness the Dalai Lama will teach in November. It's called the Mahayana Sutta Alamkara. In there, you find the 10 qualifications that a Lama should have at the very least. You find them also in the Lamrim Chemo at the very beginning, one of the first chapters, which is called Relying on a Spiritual Friend. So in the Lamrim text, so you find usually the quote given, certain qualifications the person should have. There's some at the very least, that's kind of like being just more learned than you are, better practitioner than you are, that can already serve as a Lama. But in the best case, it should be someone who has all these 10 qualities. And for that, you need to really check. I mean, we're very impatient. We want it right now, usually. We're in the 21st century, we're used to fast food, etc. But it's actually said you should analyze a Lama for 10 years. Well, this is really in the tantric context, strictly speaking. So in the sutric practice that we should do as a foundation anyway, we may not take that long. But the point is, we should definitely check and then find someone who really inspires us, from whom we are convinced this person is truly embodies the Dharma, in like is living the Dharma and can teach us in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
One further question is, can the Lama have passed? In other words, have died,
Yes.
and therefore maybe reincarnated or reborn, but we may not be aware of them physically.
Yes, totally. Even though the Lama has passed on, as we know, the mental continuum, which you talked about yesterday, doesn't go out of existence. So the mind of the Lama is still around, except, as you said, we're not aware of in what form the Lama now manifests. But we can still connect. I remember His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he spoke about this group, Pakpo Rinpoche, I think his name is, from France, this really great, amazing Lama who passed away. And I remember one of his Sangha members once asked His Holiness, what can we do? We've lost our Lama. We kind of feel lost. And I think His Holiness said something to the effect, yeah, but his teachings are still around. As in, like, he didn't say in those words, the mental continuum is still around, but by implication, well, his teachings are still there. In a way, the Lama is still, so connect to the Lama, even though he's no longer manifesting in that way. So in answer to your question, yes, definitely you can still connect to that person.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, well, thank you very much for your questions. Time is up. Maybe let's spend a few more moments to make sure we dedicate all the virtues, all the positive potential we've accumulated, having set the right motivation, the wish to become fully enlightened. And may again, whatever virtue we have accumulated here, may it become a cause, first of all, for the kind lamas, the kind gurus who are still around us. May they live a very long life. May this cause them to continue to teach the Dharma. And may whatever virtue we've accumulated become a cause for us to become fully enlightened, attain the mind of a Buddha for the welfare of all sentient beings. And may whatever virtue we've accumulated also right now, right here and now, benefit others. May have an effect on all these beings suffering so much right now. Thinking of what's happening in Afghanistan, may all the suffering of sentient beings there quickly be removed, quickly be gone. And may it affect our virtue. Sentient beings may affect them in a positive way, that they find peace of mind and more happiness. Okay, thank you very much. That's it for today. And we have got one last weekend with Rinpoche next Saturday. Okay, so be safe. Have a great week.
Thank you so much, Geshe, and see you next week, Saturday, 4 o'clock again. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Geshe. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Geshema.
Thank you, Geshema.
Thank you very much.